Welcome back, everyone. On the night of June 23, 2025, the world witnessed a moment that few believed would actually happen. Missiles streaked through the dark skies of the Middle East, air defense systems lit up the horizon, and within minutes global newsrooms scrambled to confirm what sounded almost unreal. Iran had launched a direct strike on U.S. military bases. For decades, Washington and Tehran had danced on the edge of confrontation, trading threats, sanctions, covert actions, and proxy wars, but avoiding an open exchange of fire. That night, the unthinkable crossed into reality. It was not just an attack, it was a message, a calculated act of defiance that reshaped assumptions about deterrence, power, and restraint in one of the most volatile regions on Earth. To understand why this strike shocked the world, it is necessary to look at the environment in which it occurred. The Middle East in 2025 was already under extreme pressure. Conflicts simmered or burned openly across multiple fronts. Israel and Gaza remained locked in cycles of violence. The war in Ukraine continued to strain global alliances and military stockpiles. Oil markets were hypersensitive to any hint of instability in the Gulf. Meanwhile, Iran faced intense economic pressure from sanctions, internal political divisions, and growing public frustration over living conditions and international isolation. Against this backdrop, the relationship between Iran and the United States remained one of deep mistrust, shaped by decades of hostility since the Iranian Revolution of 1979. In the weeks leading up to the strike, tensions escalated sharply after the United States launched a series of precision attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities. The operation, carried out with stealth bombers and long-range munitions, targeted key sites that had long been at the center of international concern. From Washington's perspective, these strikes were framed as a necessary action to prevent Iran from advancing toward nuclear weapons capability. American officials emphasized that the mission was limited, focused, and designed to avoid civilian casualties while severely degrading Iran's nuclear infrastructure. In Tehran, the perception was entirely different. Iranian leaders viewed the strikes not as preventive defense, but as an act of aggression against national sovereignty. Nuclear facilities were not merely installations. They symbolized decades of scientific effort, national pride, and strategic independence. The attack cut deep into Iran's sense of security and prestige. Almost immediately, Iranian officials promised that the United States would not escape consequences. State media spoke of retaliation as inevitable, while military commanders hinted that Iran possessed both the capability and the will to respond. Still, many analysts believed Iran would choose indirect retaliation. Historically, Tehran had relied on proxy forces, cyber operations, maritime pressure, or political influence rather than striking American targets directly. This approach allowed Iran to apply pressure while maintaining plausible deniability and avoiding all-out war. As a result, even as rhetoric heated up, few expected missiles to be launched directly at U.S. bases within days. That assumption proved wrong. Less than 24 hours after the U.S. strikes on Iranian soil, Iran launched a wave of ballistic missiles toward American military installations in the region. The primary target was Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, one of the most important U.S. military hubs in the Middle East, hosting thousands of personnel and serving as a central command and logistics center. Additional missiles were reportedly aimed toward Ain al-Assad Air Base in Iraq, another key location with a long history of U.S. presence. As the missiles flew, air defense systems in Qatar and surrounding areas activated. Interceptor missiles rose to meet the incoming threat, and explosions echoed in the sky as defenses engaged their targets. For civilians in Doha, the experience was surreal, a peaceful Gulf capital suddenly illuminated by the unmistakable signs of war. Within hours, Qatari authorities confirmed that their defenses had successfully intercepted the missiles, and that there were no casualties. U.S. officials echoed those statements, emphasizing that no American personnel had been killed or injured. Iran, for its part, declared the operation a success. Officials described the strike as a powerful and deliberate response, carefully calibrated to demonstrate strength without triggering uncontrolled escalation. What made the attack even more striking was the revelation that Iran had provided advance warnings through diplomatic channels. By alerting intermediaries and host nations, Tehran ensured that defenses were activated and personnel sheltered, significantly reducing the risk of loss of life. This detail changed how many experts interpreted the strike. It was not an attempt to cause mass casualties. It was a signal loud and unmistakable. The psychological impact of the strike was immense. Even without casualties, the fact that Iranian missiles had directly targeted U.S. forces shattered long-held assumptions. For years, deterrence between Iran and the United States rested on an unspoken understanding that certain red lines would not be crossed. Proxy warfare was acceptable. Direct confrontation was not. June 23 marked a shift in that unwritten rule. In Washington, the response was swift but measured. The Pentagon confirmed the attack and highlighted the effectiveness of missile defense systems and allied coordination. U.S. leaders condemned Iran's actions as dangerous and irresponsible while also emphasizing that America did not seek a wider war. Behind closed doors, however, the mood was tense. Military planners reassessed force protection measures across the region, intelligence agencies reviewed what had been missed, and policymakers debated the next steps. This central question loomed large: how to respond without spiraling into a conflict that neither side claimed to want. Across the Middle East, governments watched nervously. Qatar, caught in the middle as the host of the targeted base, stressed its commitment to stability and called for de-escalation. Iraq, long a battleground for U.S.-Iran rivalry, feared once again becoming a primary theater of confrontation. Gulf states, many of which rely on U.S. security guarantees while maintaining cautious relations with Iran, faced an uncomfortable reminder of their vulnerability. Global markets reacted almost instantly. Oil prices fluctuated as traders assessed the risk of further escalation. Shipping companies monitored the situation closely, aware that any disruption in the Gulf could have worldwide economic consequences. Diplomatic phones rang nonstop as world leaders urged restraint and sought to prevent the crisis from expanding. From Iran's perspective, the strike served multiple purposes. Domestically, it demonstrated resolve and strength, countering any perception that the government had been humiliated by U.S. attacks. Internationally, it sent a clear message that Iran would not absorb direct strikes without responding. Strategically, the careful avoidance of casualties allowed Tehran to claim victory while keeping the door open for de-escalation. The element of surprise lay not in Iran's capability, but in its choice. Analysts had underestimated the extent to which the U.S. attack on nuclear sites altered Iran's calculus. When core strategic assets were hit, Tehran was willing to accept higher risk than usual. The speed of the response also caught many off guard. Rather than waiting weeks or months, Iran acted almost immediately, seizing control of the narrative and demonstrating that it could escalate on its own terms. The strike also raised profound questions about the future. Deterrence, once thought stable, now appeared more fragile. If Iran could strike U.S. bases directly without triggering immediate war, what other red lines might shift? Would future crises unfold even faster, with less room for diplomacy? And how would regional actors adapt to a reality in which direct state strikes were once again on the table? For nuclear diplomacy, the implications were equally serious. The attack underscored how quickly disputes over nuclear programs could turn into military confrontation. Any future negotiations would take place under the shadow of June 23, with both sides aware that escalation was no longer theoretical. Perhaps the most important lesson from that night is how easily assumptions can fail. For years, experts relied on patterns of behavior to predict actions. Iran had avoided direct strikes, therefore it would continue to do so. The United States had attacked proxies but not core infrastructure, therefore it would avoid crossing that line. In June 2025, both assumptions collapsed within days. Iran's shock strike on the U.S. was not the beginning of a full-scale war, but it was a warning. It showed that in a world of high-precision weapons, compressed decision-making, and intense political pressure, escalation can arrive faster than expected. The missiles that lit up the skies over Qatar did more than threaten a military base. They illuminated a new reality, one in which long-standing boundaries are less certain, and where the next surprise may already be in motion, unseen, until it is too late.